It's a live show today with one of our favorite contributors. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Level Up. And Xavier is here to help us evaluate this PT that is South Africa this week. Xavier, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Phumi. It's great to be on the show again.
Listen, Baba, we are a week in, still nothing from the president after Sunday's bombshell press conference in combat gear by the KZN police minister. And I know you love the stuff around safety and security in the country.
Yeah,
so let's talk about that. What did you think about that particular press conference, the optics of it, and then what was said?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. Firstly, this has never happened. We've never had a situation where the police commissioner, provincial commissioner, went above the police minister's head and did his own press conference. That's unheard of in the history of South Africa's modern new South Africa. So that alone was insubordination. You could call it that. But he was brave. He was very brave in bringing the public into his confidence, which, again, is something unheard of by politicians and especially police people. So the issue is we got to take him at his word. And a lot of people are calling him a hero. A lot of people are saying he's done the right thing, and he has to an extent. But at the same time, he's been part of the same system that he's now criticizing. So we got to take him at his word, but also criticize why he hasn't done more through the years and why he's the only one speaking out. You cannot tell me.
I want to talk a little bit about the optics.
Yeah.
So he walks in there. He's in combat gear.
It's actually the special. It's not combat gear. It's the special. Special task force. Now,
but for a person like me,
it looked like military.
That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
With men with rifles.
Yeah.
On either side of them.
Had their faces covered and things.
And face masks and all of that stuff. That is wild shit, right?
Look, I was reading some of the comments.
Yeah.
And some people were saying it feels like a coup, which is scary, if you think about Africa in general, because that's how some of the coups have started, with the police and the military grouping together and then going against the elected government. So it was scary for, I think, a few people who have seen things like that before in Africa, Rwanda, and the ugly histories of Africa. And it started like that. Yeah, Burkina Faso, there's a lot of examples in Africa. So to see a senior policeman in camouflage, whether you understand he's from a special unit or not, and that special unit is not well known among South Africans. Most South Africans don't even know what it does. I think it was scary optically, but more than anything, the response from the public has been a mobilization of voices, which is powerful. People are now very against corruption. We feel there's someone to fight it for us. I don't think it's the right thing to put him as the face of the anti-corruption movement. It should be a politician, but there are none standing up to say. You see, the limitation of the provincial commissioner is that he can't act nationally. What he did had a national impact. This press conference was a big bomb on the SAPS, but he can't act. There's nothing he can actually do besides where he is in KZN.
Okay, but so the optics being one part of what for me was a very problematic engagement. First of all, because he's a police commissioner, because he is in KZN, and we know I've talked a lot about the political killings in KZN and the things that he talked about. But I still feel that the way that he presented that entire thing actually is nonsense, right? Yeah. Because besides the going above whoever your direct line reports are, but also because that is not his job. His job is to arrest people. And when you have as much evidence as he says he has. If he wanted an audience, and I'll remind you of when the Hawks and all of those kinds of task teams used to have like perp walks. They'd like show up at people's houses and
Bollywood arrests.
Very, very, very dramatic arrests. He could have arrested any one of the people in that he implicated, that he spoke about. That is his job. Arresting people is his job. And if he's got evidence, why did he not do that?
So he did end up, after the conference, lodging charges. The DA is always also
lodging a charge. You are the police commissioner. Why is he not arrested?
This is the thing. So he hasn't followed the law to the letter on this matter. You can claim people are corrupt, but at the end of the day, the evidence matters. And he sounds like he's got a lot of evidence. But if you're not bringing that before the court, and I understand where he's coming from, the whole system seems corrupt. Everyone seems to walk away without anything. When you look at this Matlala character, it's amazing that someone like that has had so many chances with our justice system and walked away. So he's in prison now. They did a prison raid. It's very strange about the timing of the prison raid, which then found a cell phone which was handed to SAPS. So I imagine that, the only reason I would want to raid a prison after a big expose like this is to get the phone that he was communicating with me with. But that's me. If I was the minister in his position right now, I would say, hey, listen, go raid that prison. I need the phone, because I was WhatsApping him. Not someone else. I was WhatsApping him. So nobody should know that I was WhatsApping him. Now SAPS has that phone, and that will never be public knowledge. Whatever's on that phone will amazingly be erased, or they will find nothing of incriminating evidence, very conveniently. But the timing of it was spectacular. It's really a smoking gun, because you can't. The minute this expose comes out, the minister is implicated. They say this guy has very intimate connections with the minister, and then his phone gets taken in a police raid.
Let's talk about let's talk about the police minister, because when he was contacted in the afternoon of Sunday, he was like, I'm not going to say anything. And of course, there's been a flurry of people who've had lots of interviews. They've quoted in various publications. And then yesterday, the minister puts out his statement. Yeah. What do you make of the statement that the minister put out?
Well, look, first off,
this man is a comrade, but not an associate.
Yeah, so that's Brown. That's Brown. That's the other guy implicated in this. The Matlala character is the smoking gun, and he's distanced himself completely from that character in the statement. But the interesting thing is, at a parliament inquiry not so long ago, he claimed not to know this character Brown, who he's referring to as a comrade. But in his statement, he says, and in parliament, he was under oath. So that's important, because whenever you're called upon in parliament to deliver testimony or answer questions, especially in his position, you're under oath. And what you say is pretty much, you got to be telling the truth. Not that anyone does, but anyway. Yeah. But now he's gone against what he said in parliament under oath in the statement. And that's pretty damning. It's not the way you wanted to paint yourself. He could have just said he doesn't know either of those characters. And left it at that. That's what I would have done. But I don't think he wrote that statement. I think it's been crafted by a handful of people who decided this is the right way to go, because more than anything, this thing is a PR disaster for the ministry, the minister, and the SAPS. So there's a lot of people that have their jobs on the line here. I don't think that statement was just penned up by the minister on his iPad. I think it was carefully crafted. And then when it was crafted, they didn't do enough consultation with him to see what he had done in the past, what he had said in the past about these characters, to keep it, in line with what was said. So they've made a mistake there, which is the usual case with our government PR. They're not very good at it. And you got to bear in mind, all of this took place while the president was at BRICS. And that's why he's been silent. So he was at the BRICS summit in Brazil.
He's being silent, you say. Do you think this is a matter that he needs to jump into? Does he need to evaluate this PT, or does Do we need him to say anything, or should it take its course? Really?
No. So generally, this is a major issue, because if it was, let's say, water and sanitation minister implicated in corruption, it's not so serious. But when you're talking about someone who runs the police in the country and is implicated in a very big scandal, the most obvious thing would be for leadership to say you need to step down or step aside. That obviously is not going to happen.
Who should step down and step aside? The insubordinate the insubordinate
provincial commission. Yeah, look, that also has to happen, and the problem is because he's brought the public into his confidence now. If they move him, if they fire him, if they suspend him, if they do anything, it gives the public free rein to say police are captured. So whether he did the right thing by procedures or not, it's irrelevant now. He's got the public behind him. But the minister doesn't have the public behind him. And, Senzo was one of the ministers I put in my top 10. I have huge respect for him. And to see him implicated in this, it's been an egg on my face, because I was one of the people that said, he's part of the good ANC. He's not the corrupt ANC. And now it's come back on my face to say, you were very wrong there. So who else are you wrong about? Someone who was very respected. He's been in cabinet not once. He's been in cabinet multiple times in multiple portfolios. He should have known what was the right thing to do. And right now he can still do the right thing, which the public is calling for his resignation or step aside or suspension. And that's the very obvious thing that President Cyril Ramaphosa doesn't want to do. And we've seen it with Minister Nakabane. We've seen it with Minister Simelane. The only minister we didn't see it with, who was fired, was Deputy Minister Whitfield.
He wasn't a minister, he's just a deputy man.
Yeah, but he's still a minister. They still have powers when the minister is not there. And I think it's much of a double standard.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, not entirely.
Not necessarily. So he's a deputy minister, which is a whole entire can of worms that needs to be, with the bloated cabinet that we have, a conversation that really does need to be had in terms of opening up some of that fiscus.
Yeah, that's a whole episode. But the one person who is kind of in the shadows here is the chairperson of the Parliament's Committee on Police, and that's Mr. Ian Cameron, who I don't know what to say. He should be leading this, and he's really not. He's kind of dancing on social media. But besides that, he hasn't done much. The DA is always lodging charges. We know them. Every chance they get to go to a police station, they go. They lodged charges against Minister Nakabane as well, not a week ago. So that's their usual thing, but they don't ever follow up. These cases usually never get investigated. These cases never end up at the NPA. And the DA does it for optics, to show they're doing the right thing. But nothing ever happens. There's never been a conviction from one of their charges against anyone in government. And they've laid, I think it's over 46 in the last 10 years, where they said, this person is corrupt. We've got all the evidence. Here's the case. We opened the case. We took pictures of us opening the case. Here's the docket number. Yeah, we will fight this to the Constitutional Court if we have to. And you never hear about it ever again.
You raised an interesting thing, right? Because talking about what happens after the hoo-ha. Now that we've had the press conference, we've listened to all of the stuff, and you talk about Ian Cameron and the MP being on social media. This is also the environment that we are now in. Social media has become an extension of people's politicking, right? Yeah. So it's not just Ian Cameron. I mean, I see Musiba Imane responding to the minister's statement about perjury. Yeah. You see all of this kind of megaphone, optical politicking, as it were, on social media. And if you ask some political parties, they will tell you how effective your social media is versus what happens at the ballot box.
Yeah.
You also then have a very silent, even though I saw a statement by Fikile Mbalula kind of, getting into the fray, very silent from leadership as you say, President Cyril Ramaphosa is away. And I don't know if this is something that he really needs to get into the fray of. This should take the course of whatever course it is. But does this, if you cast your mind forward, do you think anything will happen, or the news cycle is going to move on? We're all going to forget about this in the same way that, because again, we as a country, we're like have PTSD, right? All of the way to even Jackie Selebe. We have seen all of these tussles between the police commissioner, the minister. We've seen various factions of the policing divisions and special forces, but nothing comes of it. The news cycle moves on, and we forget.
No, you see, it's because truly South Africans have subcontracted their thinking and politics to newspapers and social media. They don't really act. But this is the first time some people are willing to march in support of police commissioner. And that's an amazing thing. It shows mobilization, but it's not the right mobilization. Everyone who voted as an MP in Parliament. Parliament should summon the minister to answer to these questions under oath and take it from there. The president should be acting. He should, 100%. I mean, this is one of his ministers in cabinet, and he has shown that he's acted before. When Minister Simelane was implicated in corruption in Limpopo, which was way before her tenure as a minister, she was removed from that portfolio. So he's capable of acting. He's just not doing it. And you got to ask why. And if you look at it, Senzo is one of the key characters that supported Ramaphosa's presidency. Without him, I don't think we might have seen a second term for Ramaphosa within the ANC. You can't trust people like Fikile and Nomvula because they were Zuma supporters for a very long time. So the ANC, whoever leads the ANC is irrelevant. As long as they're there, they're fine. And then you've got Mashatile. I can't imagine him not wanting to take the reins at some point. He's lining up for that, even though it will never happen. But again, Minister Zenzo was one of the people earmarked to be the replacement for Ramaphosa, one of 6 people that they may consider in 2029. Because this is the last term for Ramaphosa, whether we like it or not. And private sector is not so happy about that because they can't see a replacement. And Senzo seems to be one of those guys.
So and almost everyone seems to be feeling, because we're tired of corruption, we're tired of hearing all of these things and all of these people and not kind of knowing. One of the things that came from that press conference, I think, is people feeling refreshed, feeling like somebody is telling the truth. And this is one of the reasons I think a lot of people have rallied behind General Mukhwanazi, except one person, a young Paul O'Sullivan. Talk to us a little bit about your sense of how Paul O'Sullivan comes out guns blazing and your view on some of the statements that he's put out there.
A lot of people don't know. Paul O'Sullivan was one of the most respected investigators back in his day. He was considered a hero by many people. He caught a lot of bad guys. That can't be discounted. But what he then decided to do with his career after that has to be considered. A lot of people don't know the background of what he's done after he left the good guy service. And what he does now is basically a fixer, and I'm sure everyone's seen what fixers do. So when someone very high profile with dubious character needs to get themselves out of a position, Paul O'Sullivan is the go-to guy if you've got the money. And I mean it's big money. I'm talking a small car just to go see him. But he will pretty much ensure that even if you're in the wrong, you will be fine. And I've seen it. I won't talk about that, but I've seen a case that he was involved in.
It's just between us friends.
Yeah, that he was involved in, and what happened was very ugly to what would have been a whistleblower. And basically that case got swept under the carpet so fast that nobody could dig up anything on it. No one got killed, but I mean, it was scary as to what extent they can go legally and not be touched. So you gotta consider Paul O'Sullivan's current position as a legal advisor in investigations. He's not helping the good guys. He's not, I wouldn't say he's helping the bad guys, but you kind of get the feeling that he is. And for him to speak against the press conference, that was, you got to understand, that press conference had the public sentiment in it. Everyone's feeling tired of corruption. You speak to any business owner who's running a straight business, they're tired of corruption. You speak to any citizen, they look at people driving G-Wagons, living this awesome lifestyle, and they've stolen pretty much everything from one government tender or the other because they were connected individual. Corruption is robbing this country of a lot of economic growth. So it's impossible that it doesn't hit home for every South African, especially the unemployed. And I think a lot of unemployed people were watching that and angry, very angry at the police minister for being part of the problem, not part of the solution. So I think that's a powerful thing. And Paul O'Sullivan is just noise. You're always going to get noise. He's irrelevant to the big picture because as big as this is, as good as he is, he can't dust this under the carpet. The only people that can dust this under the carpet are the South African public, who will move on to the next story next month, where they find out, let's say, Minister Lamola has spent 30 million on the ICJ case. They'll move on to that and say, okay, where did the money go? And we move on like that. So unless the public can hold the government to account, I don't see this going anywhere. I don't see a single conviction.
Well, speaking of the public and the South Africans and how we respond to not just corruption, but all of the things that we see and hear, I do also think that for the majority of us, we feel powerless in terms of what can you do next? What can you do? You can watch the press conference and you can be angry and you can write on social media, which feels like doing something, but there's not much else that South Africans can do, or is there?
No, there definitely is. But the problem is it's so strenuous.
What can they do?
Yeah, since 1994, we've been kind of robbed of the awareness of our actual rights as South Africans, just general public. And, we can write to Parliament, but nobody's going to respond to us. I know I have. And luckily, I've gotten responses on certain matters. This is not a matter I would chase up because I know it's not going to end anyway. The political will to tackle the corruption that has been spoken about is not there. So I'm not even going to bother with it. But, you can write to the Portfolio Committee, Mr. Ian Cameron, and he should be acting on the public interest. You've got the public protector, which ATM has written to investigate this matter as well. And you've got MK, who 3 million or so people voted for. That is your representative in Parliament. And they want to reopen the Pala case and everything else because they feel that things were not done properly, which you can't blame them for based on what you're seeing now. You've got characters like the Taba brothers in KZN who are untouchable. Everyone knows who they are. Everyone knows what they do, but nowhere will a policeman touch them. And you can't have characters like that in a successful democracy. It shows we're very captured, and not just state captured by some Guptas, but it's captured by a whole lot of people. You got this special unit that was on TV now. We know they exist. We know they've got camouflage units. We know they supremely trained. We know that General Mkhwanazi was one of them. But we've got an issue in the Cape Flats that's not been addressed. If you know there are violent criminals in the country, in KZN, which is where he's the provincial commissioner, there are serious gang members that we know. This person is a gang member. We know the house they're in. We know the drugs they have. We know the cars they drive. It's pretty obvious that guy's a pretty big drug kingpin. And in Mkhwanazi's backyard, he's doing nothing. So you got to look at it like that. The public needs to stand up. And the public needs to put pressure on our government. And we can't do that with anything other than mobilizing, writing letters, and putting... If you mobilize, if you put 1 million South Africans to march to the, national buildings.
1 million South Africans, yeah.
1 million South Africans, which is impossible. Nobody's done it. I think since 1994, there's never been a mobilization of that size. And even then, it wasn't even 1 million. It was something around 700,000 nationally. So it wasn't in one place. So, that was the biggest mobilization we had, celebrating the election result. But besides that, we've never mobilized. I think the biggest mobilizations have come from the DA, EFF, especially. They've been good at it. If you don't mobilize, nobody's going to take you seriously. And I don't imagine 1 million South Africans marching, even if we drive to Pretoria and march 500 meters to the national buildings. I don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening.
I love that you bring up the mobilizing efforts of the EFF. And I'm wondering what your view is on how extremely quiet, almost missing in action is Mr. Julius Malema. These are the kinds of things that in the past he would have seized upon very quickly and been very loud and out there about it. But he has been missing in action. What do you make of that?
It's purposeful. What I've gathered from the EFF is that he's learned his lesson after Floyd, and he's delegating now.
What does that mean?
So Floyd was very disgruntled about Julius stealing the limelight in the organization. And I think even to the public, it came across that Julius is the EFF, and if he is removed, there is no EFF. And that was the general sentiment amongst millions, including inside the EFF, which caused a lot of disgruntled people to leave to MK and now to Mayibuye, Africa. There's at least 10,000 that are supporting Floyd. In that, I think Julius has been told and has re-strategized to include more members in the activities of the EFF. And the spokesperson has been very active on the issues. So he's raised it, he's put out statements, which Julius Malema would normally do. But the spokesperson is now doing that. So you're seeing a lot more sharing of responsibilities inside the EFF. It's not that Julius Malema is absent. I think he's realizing that the EFF doesn't revolve around him, and he needs to show that it doesn't revolve around him. And that's a very hard...
His party.
Yeah, it's a very hard position to be in, and I think he's doing the right thing. But nobody's crediting him for that, and none of the media is giving him a chance or giving the people below him a chance. It's like when you try to secure an interview with the EFF. Nobody wants Godrich Gadi. Who wants to speak to that guy? Nobody wants to speak to him. We want to speak to Julius Malema. And I think he's trying to change that. The only party that was semi-successful in doing so was Action SA, where they've kind of removed the limelight from Herman Mashaba to other members. And it's a hard thing to do in politics. I think Helen Zille has never succeeded in it. No matter who was the leader of the DA, Helen Zille has always had the spotlight. And that will never change until she passes, God forbid. But, that shows the character of our organization. And I think the EFF is evolving to be a little more effective and a little more realistic in its ambitions of leading South Africa, which is scary, but it's good, I suppose, if you're an EFF member. So yeah, that's why he's quiet.
I'm quite fascinated with this issue of the policing has captured the imagination of South Africans over the past week. And it happens, big news stories come out, and that's what we talk about for a long time. We forget that last week we were talking about the Minister of Education, Higher Education. But there are other places where you believe we should also be paying a little bit of attention. And one of those particular ministers, being a DA minister, is Minister Dean McPherson. And why do you think we're not paying enough attention to that? And what should we be looking out for?
So Minister Dean McPherson has rated in my top 10 since the start of July. He came out swinging a bat. He's going to end the construction mafia, taking a hard stance on public buildings that have been hijacked. We're now a year later, and the tea has brewed. We can now taste it, and we can see he's not a man of his word. You don't hear anything about the construction mafia anymore, and that was a big thing in the media. Even the police minister gave his, input on that, and even said there'll be a special unit to task taking down this construction mafia. Very suddenly, that's gone silent, and constructions are still being halted. There's a police station that, under his tenure, it should have come to his attention that it's way over budget. It's been 6 years since it started, and it's not completed. And it's a really small police station, and there's a lot of corruption.
Odendalsrus.
Correct.
The people who don't even know where that is.
Exactly. So nobody cares. But the media is concentrating on this issue with the police minister, but they're forgetting that there were other issues that were raised during the start of the GNU, which people said we're going to take a decisive stance against the construction mafia. What I'm gathering right now is there's been more negotiation with elements of the construction mafia than there's been cracking down. So certain characters aligned with certain politicians were cracked down on, and others were not. And I don't think that's come to light. I don't think anyone's been honest about that. We mustn't soon forget that the previous Minister of Public Works is still the Deputy Minister of Public Works. And if you think that the two are just living in a honeymoon stage for the rest of their lives, I imagine that Dean is being kept out of things personally, and a lot of happenings are going on without him knowing inside his own department. These might never come to light. We might only find them in 2029. But there's no transparency, which is what we were hoping to see under him. And he's going on his own plan, and you can see he's being pushed in one angle. Even though he feels like the leader, he's been pushed by certain forces within the department not to look at certain things. And I don't think the public is aware of how hard it is to be the single DA guy with your single DA chief of staff in a department that was 99% ANC. So sure, the government throughout 1994, this ANC never had 99%. But people must remember, in every department that they ran, they had 99%. There's no democracy inside the department. You hire who you want. And for the most part, over 30 years, the ANC has hired their friends, family, and cadres. Now, for you to go in there and change that, very difficult. Very difficult. And I imagine John Steenhuisen as well in agriculture is facing this problem, and that's why he's getting nowhere in that department. They letting him focus on the export, which is great, because he does that very well. But that's not hard to do. What is hard to do is tackle the swaths.
Well, it'll be interesting how that works out now that the executive order with our 30% starts on the 1st of August.
Yeah, so we've seen no response from the ministers that are deeply affected by that, which would be DTIC, Parks Tau. We would see agriculture, because America is one of our huge exports, especially for the wine industry, who is very vociferous. So I'm surprised we're seeing nothing. So there must be some plan or someone's talking. There's a lot of conversations that don't happen in front of a camera or in the public view. At these summits and things, people are meeting the president. We might not meet the president. We might not get 5 minutes with the president. But if you go to a G20 summit, let's say on agriculture, and the president is speaking there, you're going to get 5 minutes. If you're a big player, you're going to get 5 minutes with the president. Either to tell him you're doing a great job, the GNU is working, or to tell him, listen, this thing is not really working.
Well, G20, you mentioned G20, and we're here in Johannesburg, we're seeing a lot of G20 movement. And I know that a lot of places around the country, they also see G20 activities. But the one thing we haven't seen is the president was here, he was in the state of readiness for Johannesburg to host the G20, and lots of noise was made about clean this up. We've got visitors coming.
Nothing's happened.
Nothing. We haven't seen any of it.
We've got
our mayor's fighting for survival.
Yeah, we've got Kenny Kunene, who was acting mayor for a while Dada Morero was out of commission for whatever reason. Yeah, so the most Kenny did was clean up a few buildings. The same buildings will be invaded within this week. And then we've got Dada Marrero, who today will be somewhere in Randburg, tackling, he's got a war on potholes. I'm 99% sure that no one who is a dignitary from the G20 will be driving on Randburg Jan Smuts Road because that's a very cuck area, and you shouldn't be there for any reason other than to buy a car or maybe because you live there. So I don't think they're going to be watching the potholes there. I don't think that anything meaningful has happened where the dignitaries are going to be, which is Sandton, Rosebank, those areas, Pretoria, main CBD. But to be honest, the president's words to Dada Marero actually effectively did nothing. It was good for optics, though. But beyond that, nothing has happened. The budgets are remaining the same. The instability, we saw the speaker removed. We saw Dada Marero live another day after the motion of no confidence. So nothing has changed, even with the political parties ruling the coalition that is a mess in Joburg. And meanwhile, every councillor in council gets their salary. Every sitting in council costs us over R1 million. So that little motion of no confidence that we enjoyed, the fireworks of, that accomplished nothing, that cost us a fair bit of money, probably more than a transformer would. And we paid for that, and we don't know about it. So nothing's really happening. Nothing will happen there. And I don't imagine Joburg will look better after the G20. I think certain parts will be cleaned up a week before.
And this, I bring up G20 and Joburg in particular to link it back to the GNU, because we are heading into a cycle of local general elections. Do you think that the optics around the GNU, whether it is successful or not, and many people have many views about what has happened, do you think it's going to have an impact on how people show up at the ballot in the local general elections?
I don't think people are angry enough. Even in Joburg, you know this.
You say?
Nah, because you can see it. I mean, the average Joburger wants to just live their life. We want to get to where we're going, and we want to get there reasonably okay. So if robots and spiking and potholes is not an issue, we wouldn't vote differently. I think the electricity has been very stable, and that was a major anger point for South Africans. But Eskom has done a great job. Josiencho has done an excellent job. Whether he's directly responsible for it or it's the board of Eskom that has achieved this, God knows. We don't have any transparency on Eskom, so we don't know. But it's a miracle we've gotten through winter. I think there's a month and a half left, and there's been no load shedding. I think people are not angry enough, and there's no reason to make them angry enough. The petrol price is not great, but it's not terrible. And I think corruption is where it's always been. Even under the Zuma years, people didn't vote differently, and I don't imagine they'll do so now. So I think the local elections, I think the big game changer will be Pretoria, where Nasipo Moya will either retain her seat or not. But she's been fantastic. The issue is the DA won an award yesterday that they shouldn't have won, in my opinion. But
why
they won it.
Should have won it?
No, you see, the thing is, and this is where South Africans get trapped in the politics of things. The DA has been running an anti-Action SA campaign in Pretoria. And that's caused, so again, they're angry enough not to vote Action SA, despite the results that are there, because people have misled them to believe the mayor's not delivering. But the results are there. I walked through Pretoria, and it's cleaner than it's ever been. Under 8 DA mayors, it was never this clean. She's cleaned up a lot of illegal activity that was happening in the city. Even in Joburg, the one person who is working exceedingly hard is an EFF MSc, you know? So nobody's shedding light on these guys. We just told the EFF is terrible. If I could make the MMC mayor today, I would definitely do it, 100%. But, you know, that changes my vote for Joburg. Now imagine me voting for EFF in Joburg. My councillor will be an EFF member. That's weird to think of. So I'm not going to change my vote because of his great performance, which is sad because he actually deserves the vote. He should be mayor. Same thing with Nasipi Moya. She deserves the vote. She should be mayor. But because of the anger on the ground that the DA is creating, these people don't care for you. Vote for the one party that delivers, even though there's no history of the DA actually delivering. It delivered to specific people in Pretoria, and those people are still loyal to it. So I don't imagine that there's going to be a great shift in the coalitions we see in at local governments in the major metros, especially in the Eastern Cape. people are quite accepting of the fact that the premier took 1 month off to go deal with his son's initiations. A public servant can just take personal time off like that. It's amazing. So I think most people will still vote ANC in the Eastern Cape, in major metro that is collapsing day by day. I think in Pretoria, most people will still vote DA, and they'll force the DA and Action SA to make friends, which they will do. Don't listen to anything that Mashaba and anyone tells you. We've seen Mashaba turn around. He said 300 years before he works with the ANC. He's working with the ANC today.
Well, if for anybody watching this in this moment, last week we did have Solly Wing talk to us about some of those things. Go back and listen to that show.
I missed that show. But yeah, I think politics, there's no friends, and South Africans need to learn.
Friends, no permanent enemies.
Yeah. So my mentor was a MP for the DA, and he taught me. He used to do lunch with Nazir Paulson. He was a horrible human, but they used to do lunch at Parliament when he was there. So I mean, it shows you people get along behind the scenes. They don't get along in the posters and the platforms that they're on, but behind the scenes they're having lunch together. And I think that happens a lot. Fikile usually goes to Julius Malema's house for dinner or a party or whatever they're doing. That's a very common occurrence. Most people who know that, but people who don't know will think they're sworn enemies. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. And then you look at like the PA. I was told by PA members, staunch PA members, that they will never work with the EFF, right? EFF and Kenny Kunene were working together when he was acting mayor last week. And they were doing photo opportunities together. So how does that make you look as a PA staunch member who said, we will never work with the EFF? And now you've got your deputy president working with the MMC from EFF. And they're smiling and shaking hands and everything. So you look at that and you're like, the voters are fools. The party members are fools. You guys are not taking... Voting is supposed to be an act of your democracy. It's you acting action in your rights, not going and swearing loyalty to DA because whatever the DA does, I will support it. If Helen Zell shoots a man, she did the right thing. That's how far some of the guys will go. And then Helen Zell goes and shakes Ramaphosa's hand and says, we in the GNU together. After posting 1 million posters, which cost over 2 million rand, that the DA is the only way to remove the ANC. But now we're seeing today it empowers the ANC. So she's trying to act like they did that. So don't let her tell you anything different.
Well, I'm going to keep this show and I'm going to come back here when the local general election is happening and when those results come out, because it'll be interesting for me to see how people see the correlation between those two things. And I'm fascinated to hear that even you will be emotional about the vote that you give because you don't want to give it to a particular party, even though you believe that their MMC is doing good work. So
it's so unfair.
It is very unfair. But I do thank you. I love speaking to you and I love hearing some of these insights. So thank you so much for waking up early and coming on here to chat with us about this. There is a whole lot going on, and this will probably be hounding the news cycle. The issue of the police minister, corruption is always hounding the news cycle, will be hounding the news cycle for a few days to come. And I'm glad you helped us kind of figure out who is sitting where and what we should be thinking about and listening out for, even though they're not saying it out loud. What the quiet parts they're not saying out loud are. Thank you, Xavier, for coming. And thank you to all of you who are watching today. Please tell your friends, share the podcast. It'll be up and ready in a couple of minutes. Share the podcast with everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we will see you again next week.
Cheers.